What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some must-add waiver wire stashes. So this is going to be a little bit different than my waiver wire video. These are going to be guys that I think are more of long-term plays. If you have open spots on your bench, or maybe you just have some guys you're willing to kind of just get rid of here, these are players that maybe don't have a ton of upside in the short term, but could potentially be league winners for you second half of the season when we're getting close to the fantasy football playoffs. I did this video at the same time last year, and one of the players I talked about in that video was Rashee Rice, who ended up being like a great option down the stretch, could have been a league winner on your roster. So trying to find these players that are going to break out, later on in the year can really help you win that fantasy football championship. If you guys enjoyed the video, smash that like button and subscribe. But let's just dive right into my first player here. I will say these are going to be guys that are rostered in 40% or fewer leagues using the ESPN waiver wire. And the first guy here is going to be Roschon Johnson. When I checked, he's rostered in 6.6% of leagues. I'm guessing that's just going to continue to go up with the recent news we've been getting about him. And I feel like Roschon probably is the one player on this list, or of the guys I'm talking about, that's like a short and long-term pickup here, because he was a guy that was inactive week 1, week 2. He ends up playing week 3 pretty much only because Travis Homer went on IR, but he goes out, he logged 8 carries, 5 targets. He led the running back room in rushing and receiving yards. And coming into the season, DeAndre Swift had looked like the Bears' clear running back 1. They signed him pretty much right away in free agency. Pretty solid money for a running back, but DeAndre Swift has just been completely awful through 3 weeks. He has the worst rushing yards over expected and rushing yards over expected per attempt out of all running backs. On 37 carries, he's averaging 1.8 yards per carry. In a game against the Colts where they'd given up back-to-back 150-yard rushers, DeAndre Swift could only manage 20 rushing yards on 13 carries. So Roschon Johnson just looked like the better back. DeAndre Swift has not been playing well, and now we're getting reports that the Bears apparently want an extended look at Roschon Johnson, so he could just go out and end up being the starter in week 4, and maybe he plays well, just doesn't look back. So like I said, this could be short-term and long-term here for Roschon Johnson, but there are definitely things about him that make him somewhat interesting as a guy who could lead this Bears backfield. He's fairly well-rounded, he can catch passes, he's a solid pass blocker. He's 6 foot 220, so with that frame, you'd assume he'd be able to kind of work in on the goal line. The kind of gross aspect here of this Bears backfield is that if he's not able to completely pull away from DeAndre Swift, so far, we've had Swift being the lead back, but you've had Travis Homer, now Roschon Johnson kind of working their way in. But then you have Khalil Herbert, who is pretty much only the goal line guy. So to get like within the 5-yard line, 10-yard line, Khalil Herbert steps in. He's pretty much getting no snaps outside of it. And so on an offense that hasn't been super efficient rushing the ball, if you're going to have Khalil Herbert just vulturing touchdowns, it's going to make it very tough to, be productive for fantasy. But you take a look at a guy like Roschon Johnson, a much bigger running back than DeAndre Swift. He at least has the upside to kind of work in and maybe take over that Khalil Herbert goal line work. So I feel like for Roschon Johnson here, he should be rostered in every single competitive, 10-plus team league at this point. So he has the potential to just be an absolute steal if he's still sitting around on waivers. Now, sticking around at the running back position, I want to talk about Emanuel Wilson, who's rostered in 7.3% of leagues. And at this point, he is looking like a very high upside handcuff here. He's the clear running back 2 behind Josh Jacobs, saw his best usage in week 3 and made the most of it. 12 carries for 50 yards, caught 2 passes for 35 yards and a touchdown. I was someone who really liked Marshawn Lloyd as a sleeper heading into the season. Day 2 pick here for the Packers at running back. Thought he could be the running back 2 behind Josh Jacobs. Maybe could push a committee because we've seen LaFleur in the past has liked to use 2 running backs. But he got injured in training camp. He came back, got healthy, and then he got injured again and is now on IR. So you're looking at Marshawn Lloyd, a rookie, on a good offense. It's going to be tough for him to work his way back from multiple injuries and find a role here in week 1 when you just don't have that continuity, especially, like I said, on a good roster. I think Mike Tomlin talked about it recently with Roman Wilson, where he was like, it's tough to get on a moving train. I think the same thing could apply here with Marshawn Lloyd. And so that kind of leaves Emanuel Wilson here locked in as the running back 2 and potential handcuff rest of season. And if Josh Jacobs goes down, Wilson could step right up and be a weekly running back 1. So I think he's worth rostering just based on that handcuff upside. But maybe we start to see him push a little bit of a split here. He's coming off career highs in snap share, route participation, And like I said, he produced well with those opportunities. So I think Emanuel Wilson is definitely someone who should be rostered. He's not a big name guy. He's not someone who's been a top handcuff in years past. So the roster percentage isn't really up there. But in terms of like top tier handcuffs, he's towards the top of that list. Another guy who I thought could have been towards the top of that list heading into this season was Blake Corum. He's rostered in 30.7% of leagues. And full transparency, like Blake Corum was a miss for me. We were getting all those reports about the Kyren Williams punt return. We were hearing that Blake Corum was like working his way in with the first team offense. And so I wanted to buy into the ambiguity of this Rams running back room because like we saw with Kyren Williams, everyone thought Cam Akers was going to be the guy heading into last year. Kyren comes in, ends up being like a top 3 fantasy running back. So I thought Blake Corum maybe had some of that upside in there to either push for a committee or maybe completely take over this backfield, or at the very least be like one of the most valuable handcuffs out there. Unfortunately, through 3 weeks, Blake Corum has been a complete non-factor. He didn't play a single snap in week 1 or week 3. He saw 8 garbage time carries in week 2. So it has not been good. He is not pushing a committee. He might not even be the running back 2 at this point. So I still think the handcuff upside could be there, but I still have some concerns when it comes to the handcuff upside because we've seen Ronnie Rivers take RB2 snaps in all 3 games. So at this point, it looks like Ronnie Rivers is the running back 2. So is Blake Corum even the handcuff at this point? I feel like that's the question. Here's the path where I think Blake Corum could kind of work out here and is why I think he's more of a long-term play. So throughout the season, I don't think it's crazy to think that he could work his way ahead of Ronnie Rivers. It's not like Ronnie Rivers as the running back 2 is like getting a ton of opportunities, getting to prove himself. An injury to Rivers or just straight up Corum beating him out, I think could turn Blake Corum here into the running back 2. And if he does become the running back 2, that's the point where he becomes like a must roster player in every single league, even if he's not getting a lot of work, just because that handcuff upside is very real. You look at Kyren Williams, he's once again handling a significant workload, 21.3 opportunities per game. He's leading all running backs in red zone touches. And Kyren Williams is not some like running back with workhorse size. He's 5'9", around 200 pounds. He was sub 200 pounds coming in as a prospect, probably 200, a little over 200 at this point. And he has a pretty real injury history. It's not like he's been overly healthy throughout his career in the NFL. He suffered a fractured foot before his rookie season. He has suffered high ankle sprains in both 2022 and 2023. And then I think he was also dealing with some sort of foot issue in the offseason. So he does not have like a squeaky clean medical report here. And I'd be pretty shocked if Kyren Williams, with this usage, plays a full 17 games. So that's where I feel like Blake Corum's upside is coming in here. I wouldn't say he's like a must-own guy right now, just because I don't even know if he's the running back 2 at this point. But if there aren't better options out there, if you're just rostering like some bum wide receiver who's never going to crack your lineup, or just like some random like depth running back who's not even a good handcuff, then I do think he's worth a stash. And if we do ever see that usage flip where he is now taking the running back 2 snaps over Ronnie Rivers, at that point, that's when you have to run to the waiver wire and snag Blake Corum if he has been dropped. Now let's pivot over to the wide receiver position, and I want to talk about Xavier Legette. He's rostered in 22.3% of leagues, and it seems like Andy Dalton has come in and completely brought life back to this Panthers offense. And I think when we see these wide receivers go on late season runs, they always seem to be these rookies that are breaking out. Rashee Rice was the guy last year. I mentioned how I talked about him in this stash video. So Rashee Rice, could have won you your league down the stretch. Was pretty much unplayable the first, 10, 11 games of the season. Last 6, he goes on a tear, was a must start. Amon-Ra St. Brown, another example of a guy who wasn't doing a ton early on in the season and then just goes nuclear towards the end of the year. And even looking at those names, like Rashee Rice, Amon-Ra St. Brown, these were not guys that were like smash plays in your lineup. They weren't can't-miss prospects. So a guy like Xavier Legette, sure, he's somewhat flawed. He's not the perfect prospect, but neither was Rashee Rice, neither was Amon-Ra St. Brown. You also look at the offenses, like Rashee Rice, obviously with Patrick Mahomes on a very good offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown was on a not very good Lions offense and was still delivering that great production. So I don't think we can just completely write off Xavier Legette here. Looking at the Panthers wide receivers, you had Adam Thielen, who just got put on IR. Deontay Johnson at this point, like locked in, clear-cut wide receiver 1, no doubt about that. But at this point, for wide receiver 2 snaps, all Xavier Legette has to do is beat out Jonathan Mingo, which I don't think should be overly hard. Like if he's not able to do that throughout the season, then he wasn't going to produce anyway. Through 3 weeks, Legette's usage has been fine. He's hovering around a 60% route participation. There's definitely room for that to improve with the Thielen injury and then him just getting kind of more integrated into this offense. He's at an 18% target rate, which isn't anything crazy, but for a rookie, that's a fine number. He's a big, athletic rookie coming off a dominant college season. Like I said, he's not the perfect prospect. He was a super late breakout guy. But with Dalton now at quarterback, I do think there's some upside here for Xavier Legette in the second half of the season. Now, the other wide receiver I want to talk about, also from this 2024 wide receiver class, it is Ricky Pearsall, who's rostered in 3.4% of leagues. And heading into week one, when we were looking at this Niners roster, you had Ayuk healthy, Debo healthy, Kittle healthy. We thought CMC was going to play, so we thought he was healthy heading into week one. And then Ricky Pearsall had just been shot and put on IR. So it was tough to view this season as anything but like a redshirt year for Ricky Pearsall, just with the health of the other guys, and then Pearsall having literally just been shot. But after, a few weeks here, these Niners weapons have been nuked by injuries. We have no idea what's going on with Christian McCaffrey. Debo missed week 3. Seems unlikely to play in week 4. Kittle missed week 3. Brandon Ayuk has been hurt, but he's kind of just been struggle busting it to start the season. So I feel like there's a path here where the Niners just continue to deal with these injuries to their skill position players, and Ricky Pearsall finds his way on the field, when he potentially returns here in week 5. I think one thing that sticks out to me about Ricky Pearsall and why I think maybe he could find some sort of a role here as a rookie is he had some pretty interesting rushing production in college. Not like he was a running back or anything, but 21 carries for 253 yards. I feel like it just opens up unique opportunities to kind of get him involved, get him the ball. Could potentially be like a poor man's Jaden Reed last year, where Jaden Reed wasn't dominating in targets, but he hit in the touchdown department. He was on a good offense. He had that rushing upside to kind of supplement his receiving usage. So if the Niners get and stay healthy, it's unlikely that Ricky Pearsall finds his way onto the field. But if these injury issues continue, like I'm saying, you don't have to add him right now. I mean, if you can add him and throw him on your IR spot, I think that would make sense. But if these injuries persist, they linger for some of these top guys, just keep an eye on Ricky Pearsall as a potential pickup here. Now, I have a very, very deep sleeper at the tight end position. His name is Ben Sinnott, rostered in 1.8% of leagues, and he was the Commanders' round 2 tight end pick in this most recent draft. And he hasn't done a ton to start the season, but he checks a lot of the boxes that you'd be looking for with a high upside fantasy tight end. He had solid college production. He has the draft capital, round 2 pick, and he is a very, very good athlete. Typically, those high ceiling tight ends, they are great athletes. Ben Sinnott definitely checks that box. And through 3 weeks, like I said, their production has not been great. He has not been targeted in 3 weeks, which definitely a red flag here, but he did see his best usage in week 3, had a 43% snap share, 29% route participation. He's currently buried behind Zach Ertz, and he's seeing similar usage to John Bates. So he's nowhere close to being startable at this point. But you look at Zach Ertz, he's turning 34 years old soon. He struggled to stay healthy in recent seasons. And I do think a Zach Ertz injury could really just open things up here for Sinnott. This is an offense that has outperformed expectations through 3 weeks. They're really getting the quick passing game working. The screen game, I feel like Sinnott could fill in, do that well. He's a much better athlete at this point than Zach Ertz is. And I think what makes this situation so interesting is that we just have to look back to last year. Zach Ertz was the tight end 1 for the Cardinals for the first half of the season before injury. And Trey McBride was pretty much a non-factor. He had 6 total targets in the first 3 weeks playing behind Zach Ertz. He had a sub 40% route participation. Zach Ertz goes down, and Trey McBride ends up averaging 15 PPR points per game once he took over as the starter. Now, obviously, a few things have to happen here. Zach Ertz has to somehow be out of the lineup, and Ben Sinnott has to actually be good, right? Trey McBride was good. It's not like he just produced because he got that opportunity. But I think, there are some reasons to like Ben Sinnott here. Like I said, you don't have to go out and add him right away because there are some things that need to happen here. But if Zach Ertz goes down, definitely someone who could be worth an add here and someone who could have a second half breakout as a rookie. And then one quarterback for you guys. And this is kind of a weird name for a late season breakout guy because it's not a young quarterback. It's not a Drake May, someone like that, a Bo Nix. It's Matthew Stafford. He's rostered in 32.5% of leagues. And overall, the quarterback position has just been rough this season. We only have 9 guys averaging above 17 points per game. And Stafford seems like the one clear quarterback that's on waivers who probably isn't playable in the short term, but has the season-long upside of being a reliable starter, later on, second half. We know he is a very good NFL quarterback. He's proven that. The Rams offense has just been devastated by injuries, the offensive line, his weapons. And despite those injuries, we saw the Rams go out, get a pretty gutsy win over the 49ers, a comeback win, and they avoided an 0-3 start. And, maybe the difference between 0-3, 1-2 isn't that huge. But personally, I think it is, because you're getting to 0-3 territory with all the injuries. Is this turning into a year where you're just punting? You're probably not rushing Cooper Kupp back. You're probably not rushing Puka Nacua back. If they can at least stay in the mix, have some hope to, get a wild card spot, make the playoffs, that's going to be huge for all these Rams weapons, in terms of actually giving you fantasy value. So once Matthew Stafford can get Cooper Kupp back, when he can get Puka Nacua back, it's hard to see him not in the mix as like a top 10 fantasy quarterback rest of season. And with the position struggling so much, you have some of the top dogs who have not lived up to expectation here. Some of the late round guys have not been great either. Your Trevor Lawrence's, Herbert's hurt here. Caleb Williams hasn't played super well. So Matthew Stafford, you stash him on your bench, you could have a top 10 quarterback rest of season, which I don't think you can say for a lot of the other waiver wire quarterbacks. Maybe a guy like Justin Fields, but I think he's more of like a win now option also. There's not something that like is going to all of a sudden unlock him later on in the season. Once Stafford gets his weapons back, he should be a very nice option at the quarterback spot. But that is going to wrap it up for some of my like deep sleepers here, some players to potentially stash on your waiver wire or from your waiver wire to stash on your roster, or just guys to keep an eye on here. Like I said, you don't have to go out and add these players instantly. The ones I would add, like Roschon Johnson, Emanuel Wilson, I think those guys are worth adding. But these other players, more so just to keep an eye on them, wait for something to happen that could, spark a breakout. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thank you all for stopping by. Any questions, drop them down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.